Hi there, BookTube. It's Roz. And as you know, when I read a new or newish novel that I find really interesting or enjoyable, I'll try and share that and give you an idea if you might too. And the book I'm going to talk about today is called Mare by Angharad Hampshire. Now, this actually came out in the autumn of 2024, so it's not brand new, but I was only sort of really made aware of it when it was first longlisted and then shortlisted for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, and then really given the extra shove to read it by hearing both Katie of Books and Things and Ben of Ben Reads Good talking about what a good book they thought it was. Did you know that June has a Historical Fiction Readathon? I'll link to it below. We're in June at the moment, but so, timely to read this in June, I suppose, but I don't need a readathon to get me to read historical fiction. I read historical fiction all year round, one way and another. I don't always kind of think that historical fiction is what it is that I'm reading. I mean, it's one of those genre names that gets used that actually covers a huge kind of diversity of types of novel, doesn't it? And, ranging from the, I suppose what you might call highly literary to the, thoroughly commercial and everything in between. What makes something historical fiction? Now, the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, their definition is a book where the majority of it is set 60 years before the present day. So, which is sensible because it's kind of like a moving definition. Each year, another sort of year comes into their sense of what is historical fiction. I think I might go for 50 years rather than 60, so something that was published today that was set in 1975, that would feel like historical fiction to me. But it doesn't exactly matter. You get the general principle, don't you? And some things, I suppose, are more obviously historical, but it's anything where it's sort of in the past and the setting in the past is key essential part of the book. Is not in a sort of non-contemporary nothing. Some of my favourite books of all time, I would say, are historical fiction. War and Peace by Tolstoy, for example, or Romola by George Eliot, or Orlando by Virginia Woolf, or Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. We think of those now as classics, but all historical fiction, all written at the time they're written, about a time well before, 60 years before. More recently, Wolf Hall, one of my favourite sort of modern books, well, trilogies, in fact. And the winner of this year's Walter Scott Prize, The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller, was a book that I sort of snapped up when it first came out and reviewed almost straight away, and I'll link to the review below, and I'm really happy. It's a worthy winner, I would say. I equally liked Glorious, or even maybe even more, Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. It was also on the shortlist. The Safe Keep by Yael van der Voorden, that was a good book too. But I think if I had to have picked my winner, it would have been either The Land in Winter or Glorious Exploits. The Land in Winter was just got in on the Walter Scott Prize definition, because it's actually set in the winter of 1962-63, so it's just the right number of years ago. Whereas Ferdia Lennon's Glorious Exploits was set more than 2,000 years ago, and that's the delightful range, I guess, of historical fiction. This one, The Mare, is also set in the more recent past, so not like Glorious Exploits. It covers a sort of time from the 1930s through to the 1990s, but the majority of it is set in and around the time of World War II, and then a sort of a chunk in the 70s and 80s. It's based on the life of a real person. I like historical fiction that does that is really kind of like, in some respects, sticks closely to what's known historical facts, but then goes off on a fictional sort of adventure from those known historical facts, which is equally true of Glorious Exploits, say. In fact, this is based on sort of a couple, I suppose, a couple of people. The Hermione Braunsteiner and her husband Russell Ryan. Now, and yes, it sticks closely to what we know about their actual lives, but confidently then fictionalizes their thoughts and their emotions and their motivations, I suppose. So, yes, without being clear that it's a novel, without pretending to know what they thought. It's exploring their lives in a fictional way. Before I say anything else about this book, I need to warn you, this book has some really grim subject matter in it. It's not for the faint-hearted reader, maybe. If you were very distressed by really sad content or violence, don't read this book. But I'm about to really warmly recommend it. Okay? Because Hermione Braunsteiner was also known as Mrs. Ryan, the jolly, well-liked suburban American wife and neighbour. But her was also known as the Mare because, having had a relatively ordinary Austrian childhood, she became a concentration camp guard in World War II and got her nickname the Mare from the way that she would stamp on and kick people. So, yeah, you get the picture. It's got, dramatic and distressing content, a story to tell. But it is a clever, thoughtful, nuanced novel that explores what does it take for an ordinary person, what appears to be an ordinary person is an ordinary person. What does it take for them to do truly dreadful things? And I suppose it's asking you to question, in a certain set of circumstances, could you or I do that? How does it happen? And, how do you cognitively and psychologically kind of come to feel that that's okay or right or doable? And then, having done that, how can you then shift to being an apparently ordinary person? Equally, if you're the husband of someone who's done that and you find out that about them, once you know the truth, how is it that you might be able to stand by them, stand by their side as they're tried for those dreadful acts? Is that morally wrong, or is it actually morally right as to stand by someone that you've sort of married and accepted and love and have told that you loved? So that's the kind of, I suppose, the big questions that the book asks. At the same time, I have to say, I read this really fast, and it would be distasteful to describe a book with some of this content as a page turner, but it's a very compelling read. I was sucked into it, and I read it in within the space of 48 hours, I suppose, because I was so caught up in the events, but also in the ideas, that the combination. It's honest about the horrors, the dreadful things that Brownsteiner did, both describing them through her eyes, and then also we get the trial. So we also get them described by witnesses, survivors, and Hampshire very much drew on those witness accounts in the trial to sort of inform the whole novel. But she doesn't she doesn't dwell on those bits in a lurid way. They need to be there because you need to understand what the true character of her behaviour in order to then for her to then, for it to be then valuable, I suppose, to be thinking about how would someone do that and how would they sort of make sense of it in their heads and justify it to themselves. Yeah. As I hope I'm expressing, this is both an intellectually and emotionally really engaging book. Hampshire is a journalist, and this is her first novel, so it's a debut. I will absolutely look out for other things she read. I think what it does, that some of the best historical fiction does, for me at least, is it's thoroughly located in the time that she's writing about, but it raises thoughts, questions, ideas, dilemmas that are relevant for human beings and human behaviour today, just as much as in the 1940s. And so that's why I would say, if you are not going to be too distressed by this book, do read it. And if you have read it, tell me what you think.